beginning, God created. He created the heavens and the earth and separated the dark from the light. He created man and woman, the land and the sea, the air we breathe, and every creature that inhabits this world. And after 6 days of creation, he himself takes a seventh day to rest. We are commanded to follow the example set by the Creator. In the world we live in today, is it possible to find rest? How can we afford the time? It seems as though nothing slows down. How is it possible to even take time out to rest when everything around us is always in motion? When taking a break is regarded by many as laziness, how can we rest? It seems that the lists of the 10 Commandments are picked and chosen through as if they were some sort of buffet line. God gave them to us out of love. And we often so easily forget that the Creator knows what's best for creation. That man wasn't made for the Sabbath was made for man. In the hustle and bustle of our lives, could it be that rest really allows us to create more time in our busy schedule? Is it possible that in rest we hear the voice of God? Is it possible that rest really could be what the deepest part of our soul longs for?
All right, so we're on week 4. This is our final week in this series called Rest. And just to recap a little bit of this series, that first week, way at the beginning, and really tracking throughout this series, we've talked about the 10 commands, like the top 10 commands that God gives us to live by. Now, we divided those into the first 3 that have to do with our relationship with God, and then we kind of honed in on the last 6 that have to do with our relationship with one another. And then smack dab in the middle here, number 4, really has to do with linking those two, right? Our relationship with God and our relationship with others. And what we found is that number 4, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, it really pulls heaven down to earth. It's our link between heaven and earth. Now, those top 10, the top 10, the 10 commandments, I find it so powerful that the Sabbath, number 4, remember the Sabbath, is on par. It's in the same category as don't commit murder. I mean, that is a crazy thing to think about, and yet we dismiss some of those 10 commandments and we keep others. And so that was something that we kind of took home. We learned that on the seventh day, God created rest. And so he worked for those 6 days. He created everything that we know and everything in our universe. And then on the seventh day, he continues to create, and he creates rest. And so we found out that we really need to create rest as well in our calendars and in our schedules, because it doesn't just come. You really need to create it into your lives. And then we also found out that Jesus healed on the Sabbath. And that's powerful. That's a great promise for us, because we know that he can heal us on the Sabbath. The Sabbath really heals. And when we honor God with taking a day of rest, we find healing in those days as well. And then finally, last week, we learned about relational rest and how relationships are so key to the Sabbath, and connecting and living out life with those who are closest to us. And now today we're going to jump into the practical side of this series, how to really do this and how to live this stuff out. And I want to start just with a little experiment. So we're going to take a little bit of an experiment, and what I'm going to do is in a few moments I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. After you've done that, we're going to count down from 3, and we are going to pause, and I want you to count to 12 in your head, all right? Not out loud, but I want you to count to 12 in your head, and when you get to 12, I want you to just clap, all right, when you get done. Okay, and so I'm gonna everyone to close your eyes. So you can close your eyes right now. Everyone close your eyes. And what I want you to do is in your head, I want you to count to 12, and when you're done, clap. 3, 2, 1, start counting. Right? I don't know where you fell, but we're probably all at different places, and that's why. It's because some of us, when we have things that are kind of boring to us, time, it takes forever. Like it seems like an eternity to count to 12, because some of us are wired in a way that we don't like having that quiet space or that quiet time, and so it seems like forever. And then there's other ones of us who when we're having a good time, and maybe you like to be quiet, and it feels like time just speeds right along. And sometimes you know what that feels like when it comes to the weekend, right? The time just goes, just speeds right along, and you're like, what happened to that weekend? And it kind of reminds me of a TED Talk that I recently heard, and I'm going to show a clip of that, and so check it out.
I'd like to share with you my story about how I was raised as an Orthodox Jew. And every week, come Friday at sundown, I celebrate the Jewish Sabbath, a day where, amongst many other restrictions, I detach from all forms of electricity. No greater dichotomy exists in the Jewish world than the frantic, frenzied, fast-paced Friday afternoon to that very evening where we welcome the peaceful, serene Sabbath Queen. Friday night dinner is family time. Time to share stories, maybe drink some wine, and for once, during my crazy, busy, hectic week, just forget about what time it is. The closest I can get to leaving my shackles of time is during my time off, a sacred day of rest, a purified time that exists without the constraints of time. And when my family's sitting at the table with candles lit in the background and a fresh home-cooked meal is being served, nothing else matters. That's the power of rest. It's about realizing that all the hecticness and all the deadlines can come to an end. During the week, time controls me, limits me, binds me, but I can fight back. I can wage war with the ever-continuous ticking clock, and that war takes place on the weekend, a day above the natural world and above my self-imposed restrictions of time. No matter how you celebrate the weekend, whether it's with friends at a local bar or at home watching sports highlights, the one thing no one does on a Friday night is watch the clock.
All right, see what I mean? Like the weekend and taking that time of rest and understanding that from someone who practices that every single week, I think is a powerful thing in understanding this a little deeper. Now, I want to jump into a powerful promise, a great scripture found in Jeremiah chapter 29, drawing your attention to verse 11. And here's what it says. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Now, if I could summarize, maybe something that we all probably think is this idea of like, I wish I knew what the future held. I wish I knew what God's plans are for my life. I wish I knew maybe what the next steps were for me and maybe my family. I wish I knew what was going to happen down the road. And really, can we really say that God, His plan is to prosper all of us? I mean, could we really lay that out? And what really are the keys to fulfilling God's plans in our lives? And those are kind of some of the things I want to tackle and understand a little bit deeper. And how I want to understand those is by unpacking a very familiar passage. And it's found in Luke chapter 5, 1 all the way to 11. And it's a story of Peter and his calling. And so let me read this for you. It says this: "While Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, many people pushed to get near him. They wanted to hear the word of God. Jesus saw 2 boats on the shore. The fishermen were not there because they were washing their nets. Jesus got into a boat which belonged to Simon. Jesus asked him to push it out a little way from land. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, 'Push out into deep waters. Let your nets down for some fish.' And Simon said to him, 'Teacher, we've worked all night and we've caught nothing. But because you told me, I will let the nets down.' When they had done this, they caught so many fish that their nets started to break. They called out to their friends working in other boats to come and to help them. They came, and both boats were filled so full of fish that the boats began to sink. When Simon Peter saw it, he got down at the feet of Jesus and he said, 'Go away from me, Lord, because I'm a sinful man.' He and all those with him were surprised and wondered about the many fish. James and John, the son of Zebedee, were surprised also. They were working together with Simon, and Jesus said to Simon, 'Do not be afraid. From now on you will fish for men.' When they came to land with their boats, they left everything and they followed Jesus." And so in our text for today, we find Peter and his calling, and when the moment is that he decides to follow Jesus and leave everything behind and follow him for the rest of his life. And Jesus tells Peter, "Come and follow me, and I will make you a fisher of men." But before that, Peter had to really come to the grips with something in his life. You see, Peter didn't really know Jesus at this time. He knew of Jesus. He knew that he existed. He knew about some things that were going on, but he didn't really know Jesus himself. Jesus was just beginning his earthly ministry. He was just starting to perform miracles and getting to know and becoming a public figure in the area. And here is Jesus coming up one day, and he meets Simon Peter, and he tells him how to fish. He goes up to Simon Peter. I mean, Jesus is not a fisherman, but he tells Peter how to do his job. And for Peter, I mean, fishing was his career. It's what he knew. It's what he was known for. It's what he was good at. It's what he grew up doing. And here's this guy who didn't grow up doing that, who didn't really know much about fishing, and he's telling Peter how to do his job. And you can imagine Peter has been up all night fishing. He comes in, he's frustrated because he hasn't caught very much. He's tired because he's been up all night. And here he is kind of putting things away, wrapping up for the catch of the day. He realizes that he's got to work twice as hard the next night because he really hasn't brought in much cash that day. And so he wants to get some rest. And here is Jesus telling him to kind of push out his boats and throw his nets, swing his nets over into the deep water and try to catch some fish. And Peter, he's like, this is stupid. This doesn't make any sense. Why would I do that? First of all, you don't fish in the deep water. You fish over in the shallow water here. Second of all, it's daylight, and the fish aren't going to be out in the middle of the day because they go into hiding during the day. They're only out at night. And thirdly, Jesus doesn't know how to fish. And so why would I follow this guy who's telling me what to do when he hasn't proven himself in this way? It's kind of like me telling Pastor Joel, Pastor Joel, just in the middle of worship today, I kind of walk up, I pull the guitar off of him, and I'm like, man, let me just show you a little bit about how to play this guitar. I don't know how to play the guitar. I would never do that. Or it's kind of like me going up to Pastor Matthew, who was an arborist, and being like, dude, no, this is how you climb a tree. Watch me climb this tree. I'm going to teach you how to do that properly. Or it's like me going to Pastor Aaron and be like, dude, this is how you grow your hair long. I wouldn't do it because I don't know how to grow hair, and I can't relate with that. But in Peter's mind, he had to make a choice. Am I going to follow what Jesus says, or am I going to do what I already know, what I can control in a sense? And he has to make this choice. And it's the same choice that everyone has to make when they come in contact with Jesus throughout the Bible and today presently. This guy, there's something different about him. There's something I can clearly notice that's different, and he's asking me to do something. Now, I got to decide if I'm going to do it, I'm going to follow through with it, or if I'm going to stick with what I know. And we know what Peter does. He follows through. He does what Jesus says. He pushes the boat out. He goes into deep water. He throws the nets over, and lo and behold, it's amazing. He catches more fish he's probably ever caught in one time in his whole life. So much so that he has to call another boat, and 2 boats are filled so high that they begin to sink. I mean, it's an amazing thing, and it's amazing promise, really, when we look at it, right? And so, how does that fit into our lives? How do we relate with that story when it comes to rest and the Sabbath? Well, Jesus told you to take a day. He told you what to do, and now you have to decide whether you're going to do it or not. And I've heard all kinds of things. I've heard discussions in life groups. I've heard third-hand information from people who are having discussions about, like, how do I actually take a Sabbath? How do I take a day off? How do I do that when I have 3 or 4 kids at home? How do I do that when I got to drive here and there? How do I do that when I'm so busy? How do I do that when I got to make lunches the next day? How do I do that when I got to get stuff done around the house? How do I actually honor God with the Sabbath? And now, here's how you do it. Let me give you some practical steps in how to honor God with this day of rest. The first one is this. I think you really need to discern what is work and what is not. And that's a conversation that you have with a friend. It's a conversation that you have with maybe family members. It's a conversation that you have in your life group. It's a conversation that you have with God. I mean, what constitutes work in my life? Is reading a book? Is that work? Is cooking a meal? Is that work? Is going out to play hockey? Is that work? Is teaching a sermon on a Sunday? Is that work? What constitutes work and what is rest in your life? And here's how I think you kind of split that apart. What are the things that I believe that God has instilled in me? What are the things that I love to do that I find are life-giving, that give me joy, that give me happiness, that I love to do, and I enjoy His creation and how He made me? What are those things? Build those things into your day of rest. Build those things into your Sabbath. If you love woodworking, by all means, go woodwork. If you love to cook, by all means, make a great meal, have some people over. If you like to go out in the woods and in nature, go on a long hike, or in the winter, go snowshoeing or cross-country skiing. Whatever you like to do, you go do those things on the Sabbath, and you honor God as you do them. That's the first step. Discern what is work and what is rest, right? What is work, what is not. Number 2, prepare ahead of time. Prepare ahead of time. What does that look like? Can you make a few meals and throw them in the freezer? Is that something that you can do? Can you buy a whole bunch of, heaven forbid, you get some TV dinners or some frozen pizza? I mean, is that something that you can do, that you can just pull those things out and pop them in the oven or the microwave? Are there things that you can prepare beforehand? What about the dishwasher? Can you empty that the night before so that the dishwasher is completely empty and you can just fill it? Or if you don't have a dishwasher, the sink's empty so you can just fill the sink with dishes or eat off paper plates. Is there something that you can do to set out clothes the night before? And so you know what to wear. You don't have to be going through things. Can you prepare to clean your home on Saturday if you're taking a Sunday? Or if it's another day that you can clean your home or have your home cleaned the rest of the week or doing your groceries beforehand. I've even heard some parents of kids whose Sabbath starts on the night before. And there's something to be said about that. Starting your Sabbath on the night before, it kind of gives you a better night's sleep knowing that the next day is just like a full day of rest. And I've heard parents who've set out like a quiet box of toys. And so you set out a quiet box of toys. When your kids get up, they can go play with toys. And maybe you would set up even some cereal and some milk or some things you can put out beforehand. Milk's probably a bad idea. But you can set out some things beforehand, right? And they can go help themselves to some breakfast, and parents can get a little bit more rest. And can you do things that will set you up to succeed with taking a day off? Or what about number three? Try to learn to ignore the mess. If you're anything like me, it drives you nuts. You walk into your house, and for me, it's like there's Lego on the floor. For me, there's things going on, and it's like I need to clean it up. I got to have the house clean. I need to have things in its place. If you're like me, that's a hard thing to do, but can you set aside a day where that is not something that you focus on? Where you realize that, you know what? Tomorrow I can clean that up. Today I'm not going to. I'm just going to leave it. And today I'm going to rest. Today I'm going to find healing. Today I'm going to find hope. Today I'm going to do something I want to do. Today I'm going to gather with friends, and I'm not going to worry about the mess, the things that are around me, because that's psychological, right? In the mess of our lives, the busyness of our calendar, if you can ignore those things and set apart a day, it's the same thing with the tidiness and the mess maybe in your house or the things that need to get done. Which leads me to the fourth point here. Don't focus on what you can't do on the Sabbath. Focus on the things that you are free from on the Sabbath. And so what can you free yourself from? What can you find freedom from? Well, you can find freedom from your workplace. You find freedom from cleaning or maybe doing chores that you don't want to do. You find freedom. You can set away your phone and put it aside and not turn it on that day. You have freedom from social media and maybe texting other people. You don't check your emails that day. And you have freedom from going shopping that day. And you got freedom from all these things that pull you in many different directions. And you say, enough of it. I choose freedom in that. I choose to make margin in that, right? And so let's jump back to the story here. Just some practical things. And now let's jump back to the story. You see, in my what-if mind, and my mind is very much what if, I'm always asking, like, what if this happened? Or what if this took place? And so I'm thinking that way as it relates to Peter. And what if Peter did not make time to entertain Jesus and his command of him that day? What if Peter didn't build space into his life after a long and difficult night's work? And Peter said, you know what? No, that's something I can't control. I'm going to stick with what I can control. I'm going to put my hope into what's going to happen the next night at work. And I'm just going to do what I'm going to do. What happened if he didn't follow through with Jesus' plans? And when I ask those questions, those what-if questions about people in the Bible, it really triggers me to ask the same question in my life. Well, is there things that I've missed because I've been living a 24/7 life? Is there things that would have played out, but I didn't create margin in my life, and so I never found out what those were? Have there been events and blessings that God would have given had I followed through with creating margin and giving him space so he can clearly speak to me? What have I missed by not honoring God with the fourth command? Not remembering. See, I think rest allows us to live life to its fullest. And oftentimes we think, if I live a 24/6 life and I take one day out of my 7, if I give that over to God and I only live in 6 instead of 7, I'm not going to get as much stuff done. I'm not going to be able to complete the tasks I need to complete. I need those 7 days. I think you fail and we fail to realize that 24/6, what it really does is it gives you 24/8. It gives you almost an extra day because you're far more productive in 6 days under God's blessing than you ever were with 7 days under your own control, right? And I think when we build rest into our life for God, our relationship with God becomes absolutely exceptional. It becomes exceptional, right? And when we build relational rest into our lives, we get back to those relationships that we are meant to have, that He's blessed us with family and close friends, things that we've been missing in the past. When we create rest, we're able to heal from the stresses and the anxiety of life. We're able to pause and examine where we fit into this world. When we build rest into our lives, we can better see the path where God is leading us, guiding us to a future of great promise and prosperity. You see, too many of us, I think we're living life with the cruise control on. And it's just 24/7. I'm just kind of doing what I'm doing. I'm getting up. I'm going to work. I'm coming home. I'm getting dinner. I'm getting whatever needs to be done. If you have kids, you're getting your kids ready. You're hanging out with your kids. Or you're putting them to bed. Or maybe you're going out with someone or friends. Or I don't know what it looks like. But you're kind of on this cruise control through life. And it's always the same. And so you're never willing to give up control of what's happening. And in our busy world that goes 24/7 and it never lets up, and it consistently puts demands on us, tries to push us over the edge, you got to build margin. He commands you to build margin in your life, to allow Him to speak and to move and to bring clarity, so that we can get on board with what He has for us in the future. See, Peter was a key individual in the greatest movement that ever swept the earth. And all that happened because he was willing to build margin into his life. He was willing to step back from what he could control and hand those over to God, to follow what Jesus was asking him to do, the commands that He was laying out. And I guess the question this morning is what about you? What is Jesus calling you to do? And how is he asking you to make a difference in this world? And when's the last time you even heard from Him? And maybe could it be that you're too busy? I think the key to living out Jeremiah 29:11, and let me read it for you again. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. See, God wants you to fulfill that promise, and He wants you to do it through a day of rest.